to page 4 in our social studies magazine. Who can raise their hand and tell me what's one thing we read about last time? And you can look back in your magazine if you need to. What's one thing we read about? Max? Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I like that you put discovered in air quotes. So if you weren't able to hear Max, he was talking about how last time we discussed, what what is now the United States, North America, looked like, and how the different colors, the key told us, who, and then in air quotes, discovered those places. Why do you think Max put discovered in air quotes? Raise your hand. Why would he put that in air quotes? Will? I want my question answered first. Richie?
Sometimes they didn't really discover it, like they would fight to own the land.
Yep.
And then they would say, well, we discovered it.
Yep. So you're right. Different countries would take each other's land, but also, was this land uninhabited?
No.
Who was living there? Raise your hand. Who was living there, Allison? Native Americans. So did these explorers truly discover North America? No. They may have discovered it for their country, but Native Americans lived here. So we talked about, how Spain, they kind of were laying claim to a bunch of land, right? All this orange is them. And then we also had the pink, which that was France. The green was England, and then the purple was the Netherlands. And so we talked about who staked a claim. We talked about King Francis I of France, Queen Elizabeth I of England, Henry Hudson, and because everything that Spain was doing. That's what we talked about last time. Today, we're going to talk about what is called New Spain. So I want you to read along with me as we do the first or the main heading, and then I'll call on people to come over here and read. So, page 4, New Spain. Paying for Columbus's 4 voyages gave Spain a big head start in the exploration of North America. From islands in the Caribbean Sea, Spanish explorers and conquerors fanned out to various parts of the mainland. One of the conquerors was Hernando Cortez. Has anyone heard of Hernando Cortez before?
No.
Okay. Between 1519 and 1521, he and his army conquered the Aztec Empire in Mexico. Thank you. So the Aztec Empire was a massive empire, just full of, it was a huge population. The fact that they were able to conquer it was huge. Okay. Phil, you're number 10?
Yeah.
Taylor, you're number 15? And you're number 7. Sorry, guys. Mackenzie, Philip, and Layla need the magazine. Okay. So they conquered the Aztec Empire. On the ruins of the Aztec capital, so where the capital used to be, the Spanish built Mexico City. So where Mexico City is now, that's where the Aztec capital used to be. In 1535, Spain named its vast conquered territories New Spain. So not very imaginative. They called it New Spain. Kind of boring if you ask me. Mexico City became the capital, but claiming land was only the beginning. The Spanish built settlements to protect their claims and to govern the people there. Without settlements, other European countries might move into the land that Spain had claimed. Remember how we talked about that? If you didn't have people settling in these new lands, then another country could come in and say, actually, no, this is going to be ours now. Who can come over and read for us where it says at first? At first, you. Let's see. Emmy, why don't you come on over? Yep, Emmy. All right. Nice and loud for us, please.
At first, few
Spaniards
came to colonize New Spain. Then gold was discovered near Mexico City. In 1521, in 1521. In 1546, silver was found near
I think it's Zacatecas.
Zacatecas, about 300 miles of northwest Mexico City. These discoveries brought fortune hunters in search of quick riches. Eventually, settlers came who were
Content.
to build their wealth more slowly. They established plantations or large farms and became permanent residents of New Spain.
Nice, thank you, Emmy. So yeah, at first the only people who were coming from Spain were fortune hunters. They discovered, or they were told there was gold, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, gold! Let's go!" No, that was not the gold rush. The gold rush was later on. But you'll notice during different times in history, if gold or silver is discovered, it's kind of like a mini gold rush. People like flock to the area because they want gold for themselves. But they weren't discovering a whole lot. So then eventually, after that kind of rush of people, then other people said, you know, we don't need gold and silver, but we would like to settle down there. So then after that kind of rush of fortune hunters, that is when people kind of moved there just to settle. Will? Yeah, pretty much. If you found it, you had to keep it. So that's why people wanted to go there. There wasn't a lot of gold, but it made people want to go. Richie.
Basically, where do you usually find gold?
In the ground. Like there's gold mines.
Rivers.
Or in rivers, yeah.
The gold rush?
Oh gosh.
It was in like 18 something.
I gotta look that up. I don't want to tell you a completely wrong number. It's definitely after this because the gold rush was after we were established as a country, and right now we're not established as a country. Yep. So remember, they're just discovering North America. There's only like colonies along the east coast. Max. Okay. Yes.
So like later on in history,
Yes.
does America buy Florida and Texas from Spain?
We will talk about that. We'll find out what happens. Okay. So the lands. Who can come over and read that for us? Let's have Max come on over. So nice and loud for us, Max.
The lands on the edge of Spain's claims were called the borderlands. They included what are now northern Mexico and most of the southern U.S. from Florida to California. Spain was worried about English and Russian exploration of California and French exploration of the lower Mississippi Valley. To guard against claims on the borderlands by other countries, Spanish soldiers were sent in fleet planes. The soldiers built the forts called presidios.
I think Presidios.
Eventually, settlers arrived.
Nice. Thank you. So you guys, if we look at our map here, you can see that the darker tan color down here, that's New Spain as of 1600. So when we talk about New Spain, it's all of these darker tan places. Then we have this lighter kind of, up there it looks more yellow. On mine it looks more like a cream color. That's Spanish influence. So it wasn't a part of New Spain, but they had explored out that far and were being influenced by Spain. Then, do you see all these little dots? You guys see all those dots? That was a town, a fort, or a trading station. So those are the locations of all the towns they built, all the forts they may have made, or the trading stations where people could go and trade goods. And then these like little houses, they kind of look like little houses. That was a mission. And so remember, a mission, that's like missionaries. They were trying to convert people to, I think they were Catholic, so I think it would have been Catholicism. If not that, at least Christianity. But yeah, they would send out soldiers and they would build the forts to kind of hold that land until settlers came. So this kind of lighter yellow color, they probably had some forts in there and were just holding onto the territory until people settled. So that's why it's Spanish influence, but it's not technically a part of New Spain yet. Does that make sense? It's kind of like land they're holding on to until settlers come. Yes, Will.
Why are people were like saying like how they conquered other people's cities?
Yeah. Yes, there are usually quite a few battles over land. I wouldn't call it necessarily a war, but yeah, they'd fight over land. For example, like the Spanish influence, they don't officially have settlers there yet. So another country could come in and say, actually, we have these settlers now, so this is going to be our land. And yeah, they would fight over that. You're right. That was constantly happening. Now on page 5, the capital of. Who can talk to us about the capital of the Aztec Empire? Addie, why don't you come on over? Okay. I'm going to go on this page, but the picture's on page 4. So this is the picture on page 4. We're going to read the caption, which is on page 5. All right, nice and loud for us, Addie.
The capital of the Aztec Empire was
I think it's Tenochtitlan.
Tenochtitlan. The grand city was located on a series of natural and artificial islands in a marshy lake. In 1519, it had a population of around 400,000.
Cortez
and his army completely destroyed the city in 1521. On the ruins, the Spanish built Mexico City. Mexico City was the capital of New Spain, a vast territory. New Spain stretched as far as Panama and as far as north,
California.
as far north as California and Texas. To the west, it extended as far as the Philippines across the Pacific Ocean.
Awesome. Thank you, Addie. So, like we said, unfortunately, they completely destroyed the Aztec Empire. So any buildings that they had, all of these that we see here in this black and white rendering, they were all destroyed. For whatever reason, Cortez, instead of taking what they had and using that, he completely destroyed it and then built on top of it. Which, it kind of, I guess I can understand, wanting to wipe out, since you're defeating a population of people, you want to get rid of their anything they built. But think about the history they destroyed when they did that. Yep, think about the history, because the Aztec Empire is no longer a thing. There might be descendants of the Aztecs, but not very many. And all their history was destroyed because Cortez decided to wipe out anything related to that he could find of the Aztec culture. Yes, Max. Yeah. It's where Mexico City is now. Oh, we're on page 5, where it said the capital of the Aztec Empire was Tenochtitlan. On the map. So, where is it? Well, I don't have it on here. But yeah, it's Mexico City, which is around... No, it's in Mexico. Mexico City is in Mexico. I want to say around here. But yeah, they wiped out the Aztec Empire and then they built on top of it and named it New Spain, which is now Mexico City. I think these are pictures of current, yeah, what Mexico is now, Mexico City. Yeah. Okay. How about the settlers? Where it says the settlers. Let's have Zoe come on over. So remember, the borderlands didn't have settlers, then they suddenly did have settlers. Yep.
The settlers who went to the borderlands built large estates called
haciendas.
Haciendas?
Yep.
They raised sheep and cattle to provide New Spain with meat and wool for clothing.
Haciendas
were huge tracts of land, since there were few towns.
Okay.
The landowners made what they needed on their haciendas, American Indians did most of the hard labor on the haciendas, although
Not enslaved.
not enslaved, they were kept in debt to the landowners, making it hard for them to leave the hacienda where they worked.
Thank you. So at this point, you guys, Native Americans weren't being used as slaves. However, what they were doing was kind of in a way tricking them almost into slavery by saying that they had a debt that needed to be paid, but not actually paying them enough to ever fulfill the debt. So it was a sneaky way of basically enslaving Native Americans to work on these haciendas. Yes, Chanel? Oh, go ahead. Will? Well, I think they said, oh, you just pay off your debt and then you'll be done. But they didn't pay them enough to actually pay off the entire debt. So they would work and work and work and work. So like I said, it was a tricky way or a sneaky way of enslaving them without being able to calling them slaves. What? We're not to that point yet, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, people would treat slaves like they're not people. Okay, we don't have a lot of time. I want you to follow along with me. Where it says in 1564, follow along with me. In 1564, a group of French Protestants built a settlement in Florida near what is now Jacksonville. Has anyone been to Jacksonville, Florida? Or close? Okay, awesome. So they built a settlement near Jacksonville. The Spanish crown would not let this threat to their land claims go unanswered. In 1565, Pedro Menendez de, I think it's Avilés, sailed from Spain with settlers. Arriving on the Florida coast, he established the settlement of St. Augustine, or Augustine, it can be said either way. It was the first permanent or long-lasting European settlement in what is now the United States. Menendez de Avilés later destroyed the French settlement. So the French came and settled, he destroyed it and built his own. So that's what they would do. It was this constant tug of war over land. This is my land. Oh, now I'm coming in and I'm taking it. Now it's our land. And it's just back and forth. So you guys, if you look, do you see this picture right here? That is that's one of the forts. The fort in St. Augustine, or Augustine.
It's like a pretend bug by the water fountain.
Can you still see it? Alright, yes, I think it's still there. You can visit it. Probably. Okay, then the Spanish began exploring the coast of Alta California, or Upper California, in the 1500s. For 200 years, various plans were drawn up to settle the land, but it wasn't until 1769 that the first mission and presidio were built in what is now the city of San Diego. So you can also go and see that. So a lot of these places, as long as they weren't torn down by different countries, like when they claimed it, you can still see a lot of these places. All right, we're going to real quickly talk about page 6 and 7. So American Indians and Spanish missionaries. This is where we're going to talk a little bit about Native Americans and how they were treated. So the first Spaniards to come to New Spain were soldiers. So keeping in mind, the first ones from Spain were soldiers. They knew a lot about fighting, but they were not inclined to toil in mines or farm for food. So they knew a lot about fighting, but they didn't want to spend their time farming or in mines. For that kind of hard work, the early settlers of New Spain turned to the American Indian population. Under a system called the encomienda, the Spanish king gave the labor of specific groups of American Indians to individual settlers for life. So they're not calling them slaves, but does that kind of sound like slavery to you? Yeah. In effect, this meant that many of the American Indians of New Spain were held in slavery. Slavery is the practice of forcing people to work against their will without pay. Many of these enslaved American Indians were overworked. They were not fed enough. They were exposed to new diseases that settlers unknowingly brought from Europe, because remember, they've never been exposed to them, so their body didn't know how to fight it off. Not surprisingly, they died in large numbers. In New Spain's first 100 years, the American Indian population went from about 25 million to 1 million. In 100 years, 24 million American Indians died. I want you to think about that for a second. 24 million died in 100 years. Exactly. It is way above just the natural rate of death that we experience, and we have a much larger population in the world. So, in only 100 years. Yep. So, were American Indians treated fairly? No, they weren't. So, as many enslaved American Indians died from the mistreatment, the settlers of New Spain looked elsewhere for free labor. In 1518, they began to bring enslaved Africans to New Spain. At first, Bartolomé de las Casas accepted this. He saw it as a way of stopping the mistreatment of American Indians. Eventually, he spoke up for the just treatment of all human beings. So you guys, I should have read this one first. All those American Indians died. So then New Spain, they're like, well, who's going to do all this work for us? That's when they started bringing people from Africa against their will. Nope, Africa. So a few settlers of New Spain spoke out for the better treatment of American Indians. One of them was Bartolomé de las Casas. After arriving in New Spain in 1502, Las Casas took part in the encomienda system. For 12 years, he owned enslaved American Indians. Eventually, he became a priest and came to see the injustice of the system. He spent the rest of his life writing about the unfair treatment of American Indians and trying without success to change the system. So there were people who protested against the system that treated them so poorly, but they weren't able to get enough people on their side to actually change it. The main purpose of the missions, remember they had missions and missionaries, was to convert American Indians to Christianity and the Spanish way of life. Now, do you think American Indians wanted to completely change their way of life just because they told them to? No. But another important goal was to use the free labor of the Indians. So, I want eyes on me for a second. Unfortunately, at this time in history, people were using Christianity as a way to get Native Americans to work as slaves. They were trying to convert them to Christianity, but also they wanted their free labor. I think what they would do is say that it says, so mission residents had to learn Spanish. So first, you can't speak your own language. You need to speak Spanish. They were expected to give up their old beliefs. Many were forced to work on the mission farms and ranches, and most missions had Spanish soldiers attached to them to guard against rebellion. So in order to convert them to Christianity, they say, okay, you have to do all this work in order to become Christians. But if any of them wanted to rise up, the Native Americans, and say, no, we're not doing this, there were soldiers there to take care of them if they wanted to cause a rebellion. Does this sound like a fair way of treating people? No, not at all. Some American Indians were content to live and work at the mission. So some were like, all right, we'll do it. Others were not. In 1654, a priest in Durango, Mexico, reported that there had been an uprising over a period of 50 years. He wrote, they are destroying the mining and stock raising industries while eluding capture. The Indians divide themselves into squadrons and stage ambushes along desolate stretches of road. Do you guys fault them, the American Indians, for doing this? No, because they weren't being treated fairly. So the only way they felt they could, rise above what the Spanish were doing was to fight them. So then in 1680, a religious leader named Pope, or maybe it's Pope, there's an accent over the E, organized a revolt against the Spanish in what is now the state of New Mexico. About 400 settlers were killed, and the remaining 2,000 were driven from the province. 12 years later, Spanish soldiers reconquered the area, but for 12 years, they were able to drive them out. If we look at the map, where it says major missions of New Spain, it says at the same time that some Spanish settlers were enslaving American Indians, the Spanish king also wanted them converted to Christianity. He sent priests to establish missions or religious settlements. At many of these missions, American Indians and missionaries lived together. Some of the missions became major population centers. Santa Fe in the colony of New Mexico was one of them. A system of roads tied the missions to Mexico City. It was called El Camino Real, or the Royal Road. And finally, horses had long been extinct in the Americas. We talked about this a few times ago. Spanish settlers brought them back to the continent. They also brought sheep. The presence of these animals affected the lives of many American Indians. Horses changed the way the Plains Indians hunted and made war. The Navajo learned to raise sheep and make blankets from their wool. So the Spanish bringing the sheep and the horses over aided the Native Americans as well. And you can see on our map here all the different missions that they set up. That's quite a few, isn't it? All those dots here? Yeah, they had quite a few missions. But if you think about it this way, that's quite a few places where they were trying to convert American Indians against their will to Christianity. Max. Yeah. Does anyone know why they're called American Indians? It's because, Max? Yeah. Columbus did think he was in India, so he called them Indians, but we now know India is a separate country. Yep. And so they're Indians, and you can, I suppose, call them American Indians or Native Americans. Here's what I need from you. When I say go, you are going to put all of your stuff away and then get ready to go outside. Go ahead.